I just want to start just a couple of words of thank you. First of all, to Rabbi Chaim Sansom and Yossi and Rabbi Burnett and the whole crew. This has really been, I think, just an outstanding weekend, and this is something that really needs to become an annual event. We really need to keep this going, and we need to double and triple the size and bring all of our friends in the coming years. I'd like to also thank my good friend Stuart Heitman, who's here, who I literally speak to every day. It's nice to actually spend some time in person together, and for his vision in starting Project Jinspire with the crew here. I'd also like to thank my good friends Isaac and Edie, not really friends, really more like family at this point, for the last 3 years. And Isaac's vision, I know that he and I both saw something in Rabbi Goldstein, who's one of my heroes, and I've been to South Africa a few times. And this concept of the Shabbos Project all around the world has been life-changing for so many people, and we're happy to really be here this Shabbos and have this incredible turnout together with everyone around the world. On a very serious note, you heard a little bit from Yossi before about what happened today in the shul in Squirrel Hill. We heard a little bit before about what happened in Squirrel Hill today. I actually spent my first 9 years in NCSY in that neck of the woods. The first NCSY Shabbaton I ever went to was in Squirrel Hill. And I know where that shul is, and I have a lot of friends that are still there. And our hearts are broken. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, famous, incredible scholar of the last century, he had an amazing talk he gave in 1956 called Kol Dodi Dofek, My Beloved is Knocking. And in that, he tried to define what it meant for us to be a nation, what it meant for us to be a people. And in there, he gave an example, a parable. And he gave the example, the story of that there was a man one time with 2 heads. And the person's parents died, and they weren't sure if you give it 2 portions of the inheritance because he had 2 heads, or 1 portion because there was 1 body. So they said, take a bucket of hot water and pour it over one of the heads. And if the other head feels pain, then you know they're one being. But if the other head feels no pain, then they're 2 separate entities. He said about the Jewish people that if something happens to Jews around the world and we feel no pain, then we're not one nation. And it really doesn't matter who you are. We're all brothers and sisters. And the fact that this happened and 11 of our brothers and sisters lost their lives today, our hearts are broken. And therefore we mourn, we cry, and we need to do everything that we can as a community to make sure that these things never occur again. I'd like for a moment just to talk about this coming week's Parsha. We started to read it this afternoon. We'll read it next Shabbat. And it's the story of the first shidduch in the Torah. Sarah passes away, and her son Yitzchak needs to get married. And Abraham needs to figure out how to find him a wife. So he calls in his trusty servant Eliezer, and he says to Eliezer, I need you to go back to the place from where I'm from, and please find a wife for Yitzchak. Eliezer says, no problem. I'm there. I got it. Walks out the door, looks up to God and says, how in the world am I going to do this? Eliezer's a warrior. He keeps the house going. He's not a matchmaker. And so he decides to make a deal with God. He says, God, if I go down to where Avram's sending me, and a young woman comes out, and she brings me water and my camel's water, I'll know that's a sign that this is the right girl. And sure enough, he goes down, and little Rivka comes running out, and she brings him water and his camel's water, and the match is done, and that's how our great-great-great-great-grandparents met. Now, I've always had a question on that story. If you read the commentaries, they talk about the fact that Eliezer did not come down there empty-handed. He came down with 10 camels laden down with gold and silver and spices, oozing wealth. Let me put this in a little perspective. Guy comes to town and stretch limo. Window goes down, little $100 bills go flittering out the window, and an eligible bachelorette offers to buy him a drink. Right, this happens in Manhattan every night. How in the world did Eliezer know that Rivka was for real? How did he know that she wasn't just chasing the money? The answer is, if you look very closely at the verses, you find two verbs that happen in the story over and over. It says, vatimaher, she hurried, vatarutz, and she ran. It wasn't ultimately about the water, it was about how she did it. What Eliezer saw in Rivka was passion, was drive. That she went out and she wanted to do this act to help someone else. She ran back and forth. Eliezer ran. You feel like you're watching the whole thing and fast forward. He understood that she cared about what she was doing. It wasn't just a chore. It wasn't just kissing up to someone. There was passion in her heart. How did Eliezer know that this is what he should be looking for? Well, if you looked at this morning's parsha, when Avram was sitting at his tent and he was in a lot of pain, he had had a circumcision, and 3 visitors came, angels came to his tent, he jumped up, and what verbs do you think you find there? Vayimaher, vayarutz. Avram ran, he hurried. The tent was in a frenzy, preparing food for strangers. And so at the outset, Judaism could only work through passion. Avram had this passion, Rivka had this passion, all of our forefathers had this passion. And the bottom line is, Judaism does not work without passion. That's what the body is all about, in the body and soul. It's that our heart gets excited. We run to do what we want to do, and it doesn't matter if it's for all 613 or one mitzvah. I knew a young woman in Squirrel Hill who used to work on Friday nights in the local movie theater, and she told me, she said, Rabbi, I can't keep Shabbos, I work on Friday nights. So I said, so why don't you just light candles before you go to work? And that's what she did. And eventually she was able to keep more and more Shabbos before she quit her job on Friday nights. Because whatever you do, if it's 1 mitzvah, 10 mitzvahs, you need to have passion, because Judaism doesn't work without it. I want to say a word about the soul, about spirituality. It was a number of years ago in 2008 when I worked for NCSY. If you remember, there was a tremendous recession there. Times were tough. A lot of people were being laid off. And in the community that I lived in, many people sent their kids to day school. And the schools were coping with an instant problem where donations were down and requests for scholarships were way up. And they started to change the standards of who they would give a scholarship to. And they started to say if you had a certain car, that would count against you. If you went away for Pesach, that counted against you. A certain vacation, that counted against you. And then they said, if you send your children to camp or to Israel for the summer, we're going to count that against you. Now, when I heard that, I was appalled. And I started to push back very hard. I wrote an article in the Jewish Week called Summer Camp is Not a Luxury. It got me in a lot of trouble with a lot of principals. But I pushed back hard because I knew that whatever happened this summer was magical to our children. So many people form their Jewish identities in the summer. But I was having trouble articulating and putting my finger on the why. So I decided that summer I would visit 8 camps for 8 Shabbosim. I scheduled myself the time in Moshava, Morasha, Misora. I went to Austria to an NCSY camp. I literally had my whole summer booked. Now, of course, the first Friday night I went to Morasha, and I solved the problem, but I still had a schedule of 8 more Shabbosim to go to. But I'll tell you what I saw that first Friday night. I walked in, the kids had gotten there Tuesday, Wednesday. We're there for Shabbos, and they come into the dining room on Friday night, and literally, within 10 seconds, they're all standing on their chairs, singing songs with all kinds of hand motions, screaming at the top of their lungs. I don't think they ate anything, and then they danced out and went on to the next activity. And I started to think to myself that last Friday night, there is not one kid in that dining room that would have been caught dead, jumping up on their furniture at their table, singing at the top of their lungs. What changed in a few days? And that's when I realized that cynicism and sarcasm was not allowed in summer camp. It was as if a cocoon, a bubble had fallen on that camp. And these kids that may have been too cool to do this back home were freed to sing to God. And for so many of us, that is what gets in our way. And God is aware of that, because we say in Shemona Esrei that we davened, V'lo nevosh v'cha b'tachnu, that I will not be embarrassed because I believe in you. We say in benching, Shelo nevosh kalayim l'olam v'ed, I will not be embarrassed. We open up the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and in the beginning it says that a person has to be az kanomer, bold as a leopard. That if someone makes fun of them in their approach to spirituality, you need to be bold and not care what other people think. And so, the opposite of being spiritual, the opposite of connecting your soul, is not being spiritual. It's the cynicism and sarcasm that surrounds us that stops us. It's the worry, if I go and I do something, will people think I look funny, I act funny? Will people put it down? Will people say something? This stops us from so much growth in the world. And we have to have this double strength, the passion to do what's right and to serve God, and that ability to not necessarily care what other people think, and even take it to the next step and change their minds. And so many times we look around, I hear this all the time. Oh, I can't get my friends to do this. No, they wouldn't understand. Like, I know I'm here, but they can't be here. Now, I want to tell you, some of you read this in my email this past week, but I'll tell you the story. It was absolutely fascinating. This past Sunday, we had the Secretary of Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, at Esha Torah. And we have an amazing relationship with the embassy. They use the Dan family Esha Torah World Center for so many events now. And they approached us. They had a meeting with about a dozen high-level CEOs from tech companies in Israel, Mobileye, many of the ones you've heard of. And so they said, could we use Esha Torah for that backdrop? We're usually in government conference rooms. We'd really rather be in some place more special like that. So of course we said yes, and everything is protocol when you're dealing with the State Department. You know, we were walking the person in who was supposed to take care of everything, and we start talking to her, realize she's like mumbling to herself. And we're like waiting, and we're like, she's like, oh, I had to count the steps from the car to the Aish to go in, literally, the Secret Service came 5 times, everything was taken care of. So what was supposed to happen was, Stephen Mnuchin was supposed to walk in, stop by the Chihuly, you all know the famous Chihuly, we would take our picture, not more than 1 minute, I was told that many times, not more than 1 minute, and then he needs to go straight into the CEOs who are all important and waiting for him. Well, he comes up, and of course, there was a mix-up between the embassy and the Kotel Plaza. They had thought there were 2 cars coming, there were 8 cars coming, and no one had told the Israeli at the gate, so he shut the gate after 2 cars, right on the Secretary of Treasury and the ambassador. And in typical Israeli fashion, he's like, no one told me. We're like, could you let one more car? So you let one more car in. The Secret Service guys are huffing and puffing, running up. God bless Israel, I love them. Anyway, they finally all get up. Steve Mnuchin comes to take the picture, and he spots right out the Diener balcony. He spots the view. And he makes a beeline for the view. And he walks out, and he does what everyone else does. He takes out his phone. He and his chief of state, they start taking pictures. And we start talking to him. I told him how This is the most romantic spot in Israel because everyone gets engaged on that balcony. And Itil Goldich, who heads up H Israel, steps forward and takes out our app and starts to show him what the Beis HaMikdash looks like. We have an app, augmented reality, where you see it up there. And we wound up spending 20 minutes on a conversation about the Beis HaMikdash. The first temple, the second temple, back and forth, a whole conversation. And he was asking question after question after question. I mean, interesting questions. He wasn't being nice because he had a dozen top-notch, high-tech CEOs waiting for him. His staff was giving us that, but it was his call. And then at the end, finally, he took one last picture and he went in. So here we are with a fellow Jew, the Secretary of Treasury, a guy who you never in a million years thinks would be interested, is sitting there having a whole conversation about the Beis HaMikdash with the rabbis at Aish. So please don't think that your friends don't really want to be in this room. Because no matter what they say in their heart and soul, in their body and soul, they want to be here with us. So I want to give all of you a blessing, that you should be strengthened, you should have passion leaving here, and that next year, as I said before, we come back with all of your friends. All of your friends. Everyone here, bring your friends, because in their heart and soul, they want to connect to the Almighty. And that's what Aish Torah is all about, and that's what Project Jinspire is all about, and that's what this weekend is about. Thank you.